Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gaming Medley here, and welcome to my series Everything You Need to Know, a series where I give you a medley of information on an upcoming video game release so that you can make a confident and informed purchasing or playing decision. Today we're going to be talking about World of Warships. Now, as a quick caveat or preface to this video, I'd like to say if you want to spend 3 to 4 hours learning absolutely everything you can about this game, I highly suggest checking out World of Warships' official site, which I will put in the description of the video. It will tell you absolutely everything you need to know either in article or video form, and it's definitely a good read. That being said, this video is much more bite-sized and intended to give you at least somewhat of a perspective into the workings of the game, what's required for you to play it hardware-wise, the graphics of it, the gameplay of it, and the pricing model of it because it is a free-to-play title. Without further ado, let's begin. So World of Warships is a game developed by Wargaming, and if you haven't heard of this studio or don't know who they are specifically, you've probably heard of at least a few of their games. They're the same guys who made World of Tanks and World of Warplanes, so it's not as if World of Warships is in incompetent hands when it comes to this wargaming war-themed genre. However, it is certainly a titanic entry into it because as it stands, I am currently not aware of any other naval combat games of this scale coming out. Now I'm just going to talk really quickly about what's required for you to actually play this game. The minimum graphics requirements and hardware requirements for your system are Windows XP Vista 7 or 8, the 64-bit version, a Core 2 Duo E6 750, 4GB of DDR2 RAM, a GeForce 9600 GT, and your computer must be compatible with DirectX 9.0 and have 30 GB of space on the hard drive. The recommended requirements for this game, which you will probably want to hit if you're going to be playing this a lot, are Windows 7 64-bit, a Core 2 Quad Q8200, 4GB of DDR2 RAM, a GeForce GTX 550 or above, and your computer once again must be compatible with DirectX 9.0 and have 30 GB of space. Now, this game actually graphically looks very impressive. It's done on the same engine that other wargaming games have been done on, namely the Big World engine. However, some things have changed. After World of Tanks was such a stunning success, Wargaming actually bought out the company that made this graphics hardware so they could own it and therefore optimize their games for it much better. So World of Tanks doesn't actually have any multi-core processing. It puts all of your game into one core, which pretty much makes your computer blow up and overheat massively when you play it on high graphical settings. It has been massively speculated and probably safe to assume that since Wargaming actually owns this engine now, they will make multi-core processing available for World of Warships, which is definitely absolutely vital. I think it's also important to say that this game looks absolutely stunning, as you're seeing in the background footage I have here. Thanks, Polygon. I think this game looks amazing. I really love how the water interacts with things. I love how the water crests around the ship. I love the way the bullets and firearms and torpedoes and stuff interact with the water. I love the way the ships look. They definitely have a lot of graphical attention to detail and a lot of detail in terms of having like cargo loads and stuff on them that they really didn't need to have. I really like the painting colors for the ships. You can look more rusted or more new with your ship if you want. And I think the graphics for this game are actually really impressive considering how old this graphics engine actually is. I think at one point in this video you'll see a ship actually gets hit by torpedoes that split it in half, and then it kind of breaks in half, arches in the middle, and then folds back in on itself. And if things like that are in the release version, which it's safe to assume will be because they're in the open beta version, which people have been playing for a while now, then this game is definitely a very graphically impressive game. It definitely looks really good. The water effects are amazing, which you would hope they would be for a game where you're going to spend all of your time in the water. But water effects are very hard to pull off, so I'm very impressed with how good the water effects look. The sunlight looks great, the environmental details look great from what I've seen. It's a very graphically impressive game, which is definitely a selling point for me, because if all I'm doing is just piloting my ship very slowly around in the water, I'm going to want it to look good because I'm going to be staring at the same thing a lot and I want to be amazed by it every time I look at the sun or look at the water effects. And this game definitely has that wow factor when you look at the sunlight hitting that water. Now let's talk a little bit about what we know about the gameplay. So I'm going to start off by tying this into the graphics section a little bit by saying that the map in this game is interesting because in most games when you pull up your map, it's a separate overlay that you can't really interact with. However, in World of Warships, the map is directly integrated into the gaming engine and into the gaming experience, and this is vital for a few gameplay reasons I'll talk about a little bit later. But what's really cool about it is you can open up this map and see everything that's going on in real time on it, as well as chart autopiloting points, which is important because you'll be spending a lot of your time in the first-person view of the ship, firing your cannons or torpedoes at other ships, and you won't be able to devote your time to looking at where you're going. This is a really cool feature, and I think it adds a lot to the game. In addition, things like zooming in and zooming out of the map are all done incredibly seamlessly to further enhance the control the player has over the map. Now, if you're wondering why they went to all this effort, other than the fact that it's great that the ships have autopiloting because you aren't going to want to be piloting your ship around all the time, it's because one of the 4 classes of ships in the game, the aircraft carrier, actually doesn't use cannons or weapons very much at all. It's an aircraft carrier. So as the aircraft carrier, your role is to go into the map part of the game and designate where you want your aircraft to go, designate who you want them to drop bombs onto, who you want them to drop torpedoes onto, how you want them to approach the enemy. They can attack from different angles, so you can kind of make a pincher movement and pinch an enemy ship in. It's a really cool system, and it definitely adds a lot to this game because it ensures that not every ship will just be swimming, I guess, sailing. I knew there was a word for that. God. Revolutionary. It ensures that not every ship will be sailing around just firing its weapons randomly. There will be people in aircraft carriers just sitting in the back laying low, trying not to get caught sending their aircraft around. Of course, there are anti-aircraft guns, so these aircraft won't just be invincible things that you can't take out until you've blown up your aircraft carrier, but it definitely adds a very complex depth to the game that otherwise wouldn't have been presented by the other 3 classes, which are the cruiser, destroyer, and battleship. These classes are different in terms of what cannons they use, how they look, their hull strength, etc., by varying margins, and they also differ in speed, but for the most part they all provide kind of the same role, which is a frontline, more military approach to battle, where you're going to chart your autopilot course, set yourself on that, get into first person, and blow some shit up with those cannons of yours. Now, the gameplay actually looks very in-depth and very cool. Let's start off with the fact that the weapons are not hit scan, which means if you just point at something and then shoot, your weapon's probably not going to hit whatever you're aiming at unless it's completely just standing still. So you will have to lead your target as well as predict how the target is going to angle their ship, which is another interesting gameplay mechanic. Now, you have this to an extent in games like War Thunder with the tank combat in War Thunder, because in War Thunder, tanks have specific places where they are heavily armored and specific places where they have almost no armor, depending on what tank you're driving. And the goal is to learn what kind of tanks other people are driving so that you can target the most lightly armored part of their tank. Well, in World of Warships, angling your ship affects how much damage you take, obviously, because if you angle your ship so you're at a head-on angle with someone, they will be able to do less damage to you because there's a higher chance of their shots going into the water around you. Whereas if they're broadsiding you, chances are they're going to be a lot more effective when they're attacking you with your cannons. If you've ever played any Assassin's Creed game that features naval combat, you'll definitely know this. Now, what's also interesting about the combat, and this is something that I will give endless accolades to Wargaming for, is that they finally managed to make team-based multiplayer games about teamwork again. World of Warships is really interesting because having played it in open beta myself and also having heard multiple people play it, it kind of forces you into working with your teammates, but at the same time it doesn't force you to at all. You might think that makes no sense, but just hear me out on this one. Think about your average first-person shooter. Titanfall to some extent, more extensively Call of Duty and Battlefield. You see a dude get blown up to your left, you're not going to care because it takes a few bullets to take someone out at most, and they're a highly expendable resource. They just respawn and then you're good. Think about how little you have an incentive to work with your team. In Battlefield or Call of Duty, if you see some dude run somewhere, chances are you aren't going to be like, he's obviously heading for a tactical objective, I'm going to follow him. You're probably just going to be like, fuck that guy, he doesn't know what he's doing, I'm right, and run on your own way. It's not very often that people get into squads unless it's some kind of organized play where people are on voice comms and stuff, because that's simply hard to do. With World of Warships, everything is just bigger. if you see a friendly ship taking fire from something and you know that you have a line of sight to it, you're much more inclined to help them out than you are if you see another player taking fire, because it's a much bigger deal to lose a ship than it is to just lose a random soldier on the battlefield. When you enhance the scale of the players, you simultaneously enhance their want to help out other people and notice other people, more importantly. I noticed that when I was playing this game, I was just kind of drawn into finding a formation with my teammates or moving in cohesion with them, because not doing so simply didn't make any sense, and it was more apparent than when I was playing a first-person shooter, for example, that it would actually be actively disadvantageous to do something different than my teammates. This game just makes you want to work together, because if you don't, you know you're gonna die. There's not one ship that can just carry a team. There might be, but they would have to be extremely good. So it has this whole strategical teamwork element that most games like this just don't have, and I think that sets it up for a really strong position of success. That being said, gameplay in World of Warships is slow, and this should be your major decision in whether or not you want to buy this game, not actually the cash shop. I'll just say now, the cash shop isn't actually that bad. I'm not going to say more about it, but it's not bad. The cash shop in this game shouldn't be enough to discourage you from playing it. What would be enough to discourage you from playing this game if you like typical shooters is that this game is slow. We're talking like slower than most tank simulation games slow, and definitely slower than flighting sims. This game is very slow, very methodical, and very precise. A lot of this game is about seeing an enemy, lining up your shot, missing your first 5 shots, finally hitting that sweet spot, hitting them a few times, watching them disappear behind an iceberg, lining up your shot. It takes a while, and that might not be that fun to a lot of people, and that's perfectly okay. Wargaming has already announced they want to integrate all of their franchises into one super game at some point, so obviously there will be a place for those people who really like fast combat once that comes around, because those people will just go into the planes, and everyone who likes slower combat will go into warships, and everyone who likes medium speed combat will just go into tanks. But as of right now, these are all separate games, and if you want a fast simulation game, stick to World of Warplanes or stick to War Thunder, because World of Warships is not your game. You are going to be sailing very slowly through the water because you're a giant battleship. You're not going to be darting around in a patrol ship or anything. And there will be times when you will feel like you were cheated unfairly. When an aircraft carrier sends their planes over an iceberg and it bombs the shit out of you, and suddenly your plane just blows up and you had absolutely no way to counter it, you are going to feel cheated. When you finish blowing up another ship and you're at like a quarter of your health, and then some ship just rounds the corner and torpedoes you, you're going to feel cheated. It's just the nature of a game where it's so slow and methodical and takes so long to kill someone that shit's gonna happen that will make you feel not the greatest. That being said, I think there's also something said for this, because it's a really skill-based, in-depth experience, and it's definitely not the easiest game to play. It's a game that's very enjoyable. The graphics add a lot to it. The explosions when you see an enemy ship blow up, it's very satisfying. It's like Dark Souls. There's a lot of time investment, but there's a lot of reward. Obviously, Dark Souls fans, don't hate on me for that. It was just a comparison of another game with a high time investment, high reward. So I would say that if you're turned off by slow combat and you're turned off by having to just stand around a lot, don't buy it. Don't play this game. If you like the idea of a very in-depth skill-based combat system, play this game. Let's move on to the last point, which is the pricing. Now, fans of wargaming games will actually be super happy, because in most wargaming games, say World of Tanks, your starting item is not that great. In World of Tanks, your starting tank is pretty shitty, and it's essentially a call to give them money in order to get a tank that will at least let you be competent. In World of Warships, this is totally not the case, and your starting ship is actually a really good vessel. It has great guns, it has a great hull, it's very maneuverable. It's a very good all-around ship. Obviously, there are lots of ways to get better ships, but they don't overpower it massively, and it's also a tier-based system, so chances are if they do their matchmaking right, you won't end up against a guy in some tier 10 floating Death Star who vaporizes you all when you're just a dinky little warship. So you will be able to choose your ships from a variety of naval forces, such as the United States Navy, Imperial Japanese Navy, Kriegsmarine, Royal Navy, and the Soviet Navy, and once you get later into the tiers, forces like the Marine Nationale or the Regia Marina. So you will have a lot of customization. I mean, you can customize your paint jobs, your flags, your hull, your gun. That's just to name a few. There are like 7 different specific things about your ship you can customize, which means it's a very interesting and rewarding experience to make your ship feel like your own. So I think there's a really good amount of customization. What I will say about the pricing is that if you want to buy something, it is expensive. A premium account for this game, which just lets you get access to the new stuff that comes out, is well over $100. That's a lot of money to spend on a free-to-play game if you want to get everything in it. In addition, singular tanks and flags and stuff like that are also a lot of money. So if you're an addictive personality that likes to spend a lot of money on games and just can't stop yourself, don't ever invest in anything Wargaming does, because you will be emptying your bank account very quickly, my good sir. However, overall, the pricing model is much more fair than what we've seen Wargaming do in the past, at least if they keep it the way it has been through open beta and press releases, and shouldn't be too much of a concern for you. Alright everybody, I hope you've learned something from this video. If you did, feel free to give it a like, a sub, a favorite, a comment, a share. If you didn't, feel free to leave a dislike. Whatever you want to do, feel free to do. Thank you all so much for watching. GM out.